Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Παρ' όλα αυτά διαισθάνομαι ότι ονειρεύεστε όλοι μία βόλτα στη Θεσσαλονίκη. Είμαι σίγουρη, οπότε θα προσπαθήσω να είμαι και σύντομη και ελπίζω καθόλου κουραστική. Ευχαριστώ πολύ κύριε Ανδρησόπουλο για την πρόσκληση.
For your invitation. And I would like to begin by pointing out that in this session we shall be speaking about RES and climate change. What I would like to point out from a political perspective is the fact that we need to understand that we have now entered into a new era. Until recently, climate change was the object of scientific analysis, discussions taking place in various fora consisting of diverse social groups, and discussed by specific countries and viewed as a moral obligation rather vis-à-vis the planet and the next generation. A few days ago, however, in the G7 summit of the seven strongest countries in France, President Macron, without any former preparation, spoke about the issue of the destruction of the Amazon forest as a major issue, and even President Trump was obliged to agree with him. Our Prime Minister, Mr. Mitsotakis, also himself in his recent meetings and talks with his European peers in Germany, France, and Holland, has highlighted the green agenda as a main priority, pointing out that green energy can actually become an opportunity for green development. And now we have come to a new period where we have gone beyond the theoretical comments about the future generations and the environment. Extreme climatic phenomena that are more and more affecting countries all over the planet. We have recently experienced them even in Chalkidiki, close to Thessaloniki. And this is obliging every single government to implement innovative, daring new policies in every field of action in order to avert climate change. This is a topic that does not only impact on the Ministry for the Environment and Energy, but it is also an issue that horizontally affects all ministries and all democratic bodies, the government, the parliament, the local authorities, every business and every citizen. However, this transition cannot take place without measures that will bring upheaval to the whole of the production process that we have been following thus far. We need decentralized structures, new forms of storage and new saving procedures, new farming methods. Actions for climate change are closely linked today to the fourth industrial revolution, and green energy, storage, savings, smart networks, smart cities, smart buildings, artificial intelligence, all this in unison, and many more of the achievements of the human mind in recent decades are creating a very challenging future that we are obliged to answer to by taking and implementing positive measures. Now moving from the global picture to the Ministry for Energy, let's take a look at the specific policies that we'll be focusing on in order to further develop our green energy reality. In this table, we see that the installed capacity today, from the most recent press bulletin of YAPEP in June 2019, we see that the installed capacity is quite far below the goals for 2020. And I'm sure that very few people in here believe and are optimistic that we will reach 18% in RES by 2020. However, I think that we can make up time, and we need to do so, in order to change this reality and achieve an increase of the RES share in the gross national energy consumption. We have before us the goal for 2030. As a government, we aspire to set more ambitious goals for the future. And we need to see how what is at this time simply a wish can actually become reality. So we start with the National Plan for Energy and the Climate, which the Deputy Minister mentioned this morning. This national plan is the roadmap for our country in our efforts towards a long-term European strategy for an economy, a zero-carbon economy by 2050. Next Tuesday at the Ministry, there will be a meeting of the new ESEC Council in order to review the new goals for RES and energy saving for 2030. We aspire and hope that by the end of the year that the relevant text will be complete. Right now, we are working on the relevant assessment sent to us by the European Commission, and we want to submit then the relevant document to the European Commission by the end of December in order to be binding for our country. What will this text entail? Diversification of the energy mix, a shift to clean energy, and a reduction as regards the lignite share in domestic power generation. In order to achieve this today, from the position we are in at the moment, we need to focus on specific actions, and I will mention 6 indicative actions. I very often hear at various conferences and discussions on RES about the complaints of businesses regarding the inefficient process of licensing. So our first goal is to have easy, simplified licensing procedures for RES without sticking to the bureaucracy of public services. Starting with a production license, there is no need to have to submit today to the relevant licensing authority a whole pile of documents and clarifications to have to go through all the regulatory authority protocols, where papers get lost, and the lives of those doing the evaluation and those being evaluated is basically very negatively affected by all this red tape. So the RA has observed these problems, have taken them into account, and they're now working on the simplification of the licensing process. What we have discussed with the Deputy Minister is that we are going to put even more pressure on the relevant licensing authorities in order for this work to be completed together with the Ministry of Energy, so that by the end of the year we have a simplified process starting with the production license. And then this will be combined with the simplification of the next stages regarding environmental and spatial planning issues. The relevant companies know this very well already. Many companies, many authorities which have to provide their opinion on relevant issues very often have to submit documents for the same thing over and over again. What we try to do is to identify within the process where there is repetition, so that we can do away with processes which are repeated needlessly. And something similar has to be done also by ADMIE, because the signage and modification of contracts needs to change. There is great delay right now. Of course, there is a lack of staff. And there's a whole volume of work which needs to be outsourced, or the process has to be standardized in order to address this. Because today, when we have someone who wants to use a wind turbine which is upgraded, they hesitate to do so because they don't want to enter the whole process of applying for a modification of the relevant license, since they know that it's very time-consuming. The simplification of the processes has to focus, of course, on the Repu regulation, directive, which talks about a 2-year period and a contact point with investors. So right now, we are taking into account this obligation, and we know that steps need to be taken soon, so that the next 5, 7, or 10 years that we are speaking about, the accusations that we hear from investors regarding such delays need to be limited. Second action, a new spatial planning framework for RES. We are already in talks with the relevant minister, Mr. Economou, so that the relevant processes for appointing a consultant are completed over a 3-month period, and he is going to be elaborating the new spatial plan for RES based on the new regulations and the relevant authorities and stakeholders. Third, we are taking a direct look at the potential of hybrid stations in order to resolve the problems of non-interconnected islands. The cost of hybrid stations and storage systems seems to be going down continuously, which means that such projects can potentially help in the stability of the electricity grid, both and the islands that will remain autonomous and those that will be interconnected in due course. So the relevant institutional framework has to be elaborated and announced to the European Commission. Also, one of the top priorities of the government is the acceleration of the electricity interconnection of the islands. This has to be done very rapidly, quick timeline, starting with Crete. Issue number 5. It has to do with the RES projects of a large scale. I'm referring to an issue that the former government also was well aware of, but I think that they did not look into this issue because of its mentality, which was against any such kind of development. We're talking about large-scale projects of over 250 megawatts and their exemption from the bidding process. Due to the large scale of these projects, they offer the advantage of strengthening the penetration of RES in the country's system. And this is a process which is included within the institutional framework of the European Commission. It has to do with the guidelines for state subsidies, and we have a relevant opinion from RAE. There are Greek and foreign investors ready to take a step in this direction, and we're already discussing some licenses. So we need to go ahead with the relevant legislative provision in order to have relevant notification then sent to the European Commission. But before all this that I've already mentioned, which are actions that we are currently working on at the Ministry of Energy, we are also aware of the fact that there is the issue of RES payments for those who have signed the contract for operational surcharge. The Ministry will soon be resolving this issue that has remained pending from the previous government, and also the issue of the final clearing of the outstanding debts. One issue now about energy efficiency. Our country may be quite a good level regarding energy savings measures vis-à-vis its goals and other European countries. However, as we can see in these graphs, this is rather the result of the economic crisis that our country has been experiencing and the reduction in the energy consumption on the part of the citizens, rather than any specific policy that led to energy efficiency for Greece. We are not going to go into figures and percentages because they may give us a lot of information or none. But what we want to go ahead with are the commitments that the Prime Minister has already made regarding tax discount regarding issues such as upgrading of buildings, regarding energy issues. We also have the new Savings at Home platform that has opened up recently with a budget of 275 million. And more than 25,000 applications are expected to be covered by this. Another policy that I'd like to mention and the ministry has embraced is the development of e-mobility in Greece. It is a fact that the cost of batteries and electric cars are gradually going down. In other countries, we see that the very important steps have been taken in this direction compared to the ones that Greece has made. We need to very quickly create the necessary framework in order to ensure the penetration of e-mobility in Greece. How can we do this? We aim to create a working group at the ministry that will be involved in the elaboration of a national action plan for e-mobility. Of course, when we hear about national action plans and such grandiose plans in general, people usually think that this is going to mean a delay of years, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel, because national electric mobility development plans already can be found in many other countries, so it's not difficult for us to use them in order to identify the best practices and then incorporate them within our own framework. And if this is combined with a package of tax and financial incentives, then we definitely will have taken a major step forward. Truth is, today, for your information, in Greece we do have two such national action plans, one at the Ministry of Energy and one at the Ministry for Transport. And I mentioned this as an example for you to understand how very frequently the relevant authorities and services often create contradicting policies. In the former National Action Plan of the Ministry of Energy mentioned for that in 2030, the goal was for 10% of the cars on the road to be electric. If you look at the figures, if today we have about 5.6 million cars on the road, 10% is 560,000 cars. In order to reach this goal of 10%, which was part of the previous National Action Plan, then this means that for the next 12 years until 2030, about 46,000 electric cars will have to be sold in Greece per annum. Whereas today, according to the data we have from the car manufacturing companies, in 2018, for example, only 315 such cars were sold, whereas the goal was to be 46,000 per year in the previous action plan. The Ministry for Transport has also set a national action plan for the development of the market for alternative fuel infrastructure, and there the goal that was set, or rather that has been set compared to the previous ambitious goal, is that by 2030 there will be 15,000 electric cars in total. So you see right away that we as a country legislating, the Ministry of Energy talks about 560,000 cars in the past. 1 in 3 cars to be electric by 2030, and then another ministry talking about 15,000 cars. How can anyone come to a conclusion about our future way forward, and why should there be such contradicting policies in ministries as there were in the past? We want to clear the arena. We want to have a smart plan for the development of e-mobility based on the incentives that I mentioned and the financing tools available which are being underexploited within this field. We want to set our future goals regarding the penetration of electric cars and the establishment of charging stations starting in 2025 and then with more ambitious goals for the future. The Ministry also aims to publish very soon the Common Ministerial Decision that will regulate the e-mobility market and set the terms for the operation of the operators of the charging station. We're talking about a joint ministerial decision that was not prepared in 4 years by the previous government. And this is a framework which, for our country, will create the necessary business framework for investments within the charging infrastructure business. All that I've already mentioned, for us, constitutes a new green challenge, as we call it, the development of clean energy with a maximum exploitation of all post-lignite programs and prospects, with European programs such as the Just Transition Fund, which allocate significant financing in order to reach this transition more smoothly and fairly. And this is a measure that concerns us all, because we want climate justice, environmental quality, and better quality of life to be predominant. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at a time where there is a need to move beyond traditional policies, differences, and disputes. Logic, science, and new technology need to be at the service of society, and we are decided on doing so. And very soon we believe that there will be visible results for all Greek citizens. Thank you very much for your time.